Welcome back to another episode of NFT Catcher Podcast. We'd like to remind everybody that nothing on the show is meant as financial advice, and to please do your own research. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Now the subject is NFTs.
They're known as non-fungible tokens, or NFTs.
NFTs are exploding in popularity.
This is a technology that will forever change the way people interact.
So it is happening whether you understand it and like it or not.
This phenomenon is moving. The digital.
You have now joined Jenny from the blockchain and Michael Keene on the NFT Catcher Podcast.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the NFT Catcher Podcast with me, Jenny from the blockchain, and my co-host, Michael Keene. For today's interview, we have Robby Yung joining us. He is the CEO of Animoca Brands. Robby, welcome to the show.
Hi, good to be here. Good to meet you, Jenny and Michael.
Yeah, it's good to meet you as well. The first time we met was in the Belle's Twitter Spaces for like her 100th episode. And I was like, oh, how have I not been following this guy? So yeah, shout out to Belle for kind of...
Absolutely. Although I got the feeling that was actually, that was kind of a block party and there were a lot of people there.
Yeah.
If I imagined it in my head as a physical space, it was pretty crowded.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, she basically invited everybody that she's ever had on the show to kind of come up. So yeah, it was a big pot of people and everyone kept kind of coming in and out, trying to give other people time on the mic. But yeah, welcome. We're excited to talk about Animoca Brands. Michael and I have heard so much about it just through all of the companies you guys have invested in, all the Web3 companies. So excited to dive into that. But I wanted to start by hearing your Web3 story on how you got into NFTs.
Okay. So I guess my personal story is not much different from the company because it was courtesy of my colleagues that I ended up here. We were a mobile games business. We started back in 2009, and we focused on free-to-play mobile games for many years. And then in 2017, the ICO summer, I think, because then I think DeFi summer was 2019, if I'm remembering my summers. But it was the ICO summer, and I think blockchain really got onto a lot of people's radar, including ours. And we were looking for new areas of growth because the gaming business is a cutthroat, competitive world. And as we always have our eyes out for new technology, we came across blockchain. And this was kind of at the end of the summer. And we got to know a team in Vancouver that was working on a hackathon project. They were a blockchain dev team, and they were trying to see how they could use tokens essentially to tokenize content in games. But in order to do so, they'd have to make it unique. So they ended up writing what is now known as the ERC 721 standard, or kind of giving birth to the NFT. Because as it turns out, that team we were working with was the team that eventually became Dapper Labs. And so the project we worked on together with them was called CryptoKitties. And that was the game for which they created the NFT originally. So we had the good fortune to be kind of in on the ground floor, so to speak, of this new technology where, there's a bit of intersection between both blockchain and games.
Nice. That is cool. Yeah. Wasn't it Axiom or something like that?
Axiom Zen. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Roham's company right before their Dapper Labs. I know Michael had a question about CryptoKitties.
Yeah. Well, honestly, that's one thing that I didn't realize about you when I started doing my research. And it said one of the things that came up was that you spoke at the inaugural CryptoKitties meetup in London in 2018. And I was like, wow, so this guy's OG. He's not like a lot of these like CEOs coming in. I could name some, but I won't, that aren't. And then also the fact, I think it's really cool. You've been at Animoca since the beginning as well, right?
Pretty much.
Like early on, you've been
close enough. I've been there for 12 years, which is a long time in blockchain terms.
You've been the CEO, right? Yeah, that's a long time, especially people moving companies and all that stuff. So that's really cool. But just the fact that you really are, from the very beginning, like you said, in the Web3 NFT world, I think is really cool.
Yeah, well, and I think also we've been here, like for us working on that project, working on CryptoKitties with the Axiom Zen guys was really a groundbreaking moment for us in how we thought about the potential applications for blockchain, because to us, that experience taught us just basically the fundamental idea of what it means to have true digital ownership. And, we were mercenary gamers. We're always looking for new audiences. And the first thought that occurred to us was, look, this past summer, how many millions of people bought millions of tokens, whether it was Tron or EOS or Ripple or you name it. And we thought to ourselves, what are they going to do with these tokens? If we make games that accept tokens, do you think they'll spend them in our games? And literally that was the first idea. And we're like, okay, cool. Let's make games that accept tokens because maybe they'll spend their tokens because nobody else is doing it. So we can get a jump on this. And so that's kind of how the idea started. And then as we got into it further, we started to realize the implications of what digital ownership means and this idea of being able to actually build asset value in digital items. And it's a really fundamental idea to essentially the idea of building, not to make it sound too grandiose, but the open metaverse, basically building a software ecosystem and an internet that's based on open standards and largely, open source software development methods where things can be interoperable.
Wow. Speaking of open metaverse, things interoperable, I mean, it's pretty wild. I'm just even looking at your background. There's 8 posters, there's so much going on, but let's talk about Otherside a little bit. Is that cool? I don't know how deep you are into Otherside. So I have my OG land, my 8475, same numbers, my OG ape. What do you foresee? What am I going to be able to do with that land? And then I'll follow-up question for sure. But what's that look like for somebody like me? I don't really play games. I definitely don't build games, but I have the land because I love the ecosystem, love Yuga, all that. What do I do with that land? What am I looking forward to?
Sure. So I can't really comment on specifics, and that's not me sounding cool because I know everything. It's honestly because I don't work on the project. But from what I do know of it, I think the best way to characterize it is it's not dissimilar to the idea behind Sandbox as a UGC metaverse, but the execution is going to be very different, right? Because the idea is that the other side is going to be, it's based on Unreal 5, like high definition quality, as in Unreal 5, the game engine from Epic. So they want it to be very sort of AAA game quality, where it's very immersive, very realistic, 3-dimensional content. And the idea behind people owning land in that metaverse, of course, is it gives them a place to create their own creations. And some people just want to have their own space there. If you want to hang out and have a place to socialize with friends or display your NFT art collection or whatever you want. And some people, of course, are going to speculate because degens are going to degen, right?
Yep. And these lands are gigantic, right? From what I understand, each plot is it's a massive amount of space to build on.
Yes.
Well, and relatively speaking, of course.
Yes. And also they have very big ambitions because, where I think we diverge in terms of Sandbox and Otherside and being shareholders of both, we're looking forward to the successes of both projects. But Otherside is very much geared towards that environment being defined by the graphical resolution and also the style, because the style of the Otherside, this swamp, kind of ethos and the whole Bored Ape Yacht Club culture knitting its way through the art style is really important, in the same way that for Sandbox, that voxelated art style is kind of one of the USPs of Sandbox. It gives you your identity in Sandbox.
Okay, so they're kind of, I get it. So similar ideas, and it's almost a little bit like the Roblox Fortnite model, where you could build your own ecosystems for people to come play in.
Except I think what they want to do is, I think they want to make it, and again, this applies for Sandbox too. I think what they want to do is they want to make it a place where builders, the idea of what a builder is not clearly defined, meaning you and I as amateurs, I'm assuming you're an amateur, can be a builder.
Excuse me? Yeah, go ahead.
But at the same time, if some, well-established game dev studio wants to build content, they can also build content on the land next door. So, just in the same way you can have an apartment building next to a house I built myself.
There was talk early on of the low numbers being important, the OG ape numbers, the mutant numbers, up to 30,000. Is there anything you could speak to that, or is it's kind of hard if you?
Sorry,
it's
I
hard to know the
can't
details?
give you any insight onto the Easter eggs and the lore because honestly, I'm not the guy. And
Yeah.
aside from the fact that I'm not sure I'd see the light of day if I knew something that I revealed.
No doubt. I know there was like a map and like where yours was kind of strategic and stuff. People were all getting into that. I guess that's all TBD. One final question about that. Well, actually, a couple more if you don't mind. A couple came up. Sorry, Jenny. This is actually very interesting. But do you know, is there going to be another 100,000 still? Is that still the plan?
To be honest, I don't know.
Okay, because they originally said 200,000. They dropped 100, and it probably like at this point, I'm sure they felt like there's no way to drop it at this point in the market, just because it'd be hard to find.
I think if there's anything that the Yuga team has proved over the last couple of years is that they're extremely innovative and they have their finger on the pulse of their community. So I think that as we've seen from some of the games that have launched and stuff and the experiences, and I have to give a shout out to ApeFest, which is we're co-hosting right now in Hong Kong.
Yeah, are you in Hong Kong?
I'm not. My colleagues are there doing the co-hosting.
Nice.
Hey, somebody's got to do the real work around here, right?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
But I was going to say, I think they've really got their fingers on the pulse of their community, and so I think you can think about nothing ever being set in absolute stone because they know Web3 is a flexible environment, and they have to react to not just market conditions, but they have to do what's right for the community at all times, and that may change, and that's okay.
Yeah, there's they know it. They can't drop 100,000 right now. Honestly, if I was advising, I would just say we're putting 100,000 on hold for like 5 years. I think that would help. That would help the ecosystem.
For Web3, like building games in Web3 also is very challenging for that same reason, because if you're going to try to build a AAA game that has a 3 or 4 year development life cycle, how do you even know that it will be relevant when the game comes out? Because Web3 could have, like the next version of DeFi could come out or something and completely disrupt the marketplace.
Yeah, it's so young. You're right about that. It's nobody even really knows exactly what Web3 gaming is. You use basically you use a token to get upgrades or to play the game, or you connect with your wallet and use your avatar maybe. But you're right. Like what I've said a few times, maybe you could even speak to this. Like I say that somebody is going to knock Web3 gaming out of the park, and I don't know who it is, but we're going to see it, and it's going to be obvious when it happens. Like when Grand Theft Auto happened, like when things like that happen, there's going to be something that happens for Web3 gaming.
Yes. Although I think that you're going to start to see successes that are actually more subtle than that, because I think what you're going to see over the next 12 months is you're going to see a raft of games come out that will be kind of a reaction to the backlash from the Web 2 gaming community, particularly the US Web 2 gaming community, or I should say US and European communities, to this idea of the financialization of games, like that sort of anti-NFT crowd. And I think what you'll see is a lot of games that will be built on blockchain, but will not be actively marketing that feature. It will just be that, hey, you own a bunch of stuff in your game, and guess what? You can sell it and trade it in this marketplace, and you can have a secure identity and blah, 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 but it's custodial. And so you connect with Wallet Connect, or you connect with your social login. And so it's not going to be obviously Web3, but it's very much going to be Web3. And I think you're going to see a bunch of product like that in the next 12 months.
I like that. It's basically like, if you don't want to care about Web3, then don't even worry about it. Play your game and enjoy it. But you can sell them if you want now. They're yours.
Because it's a better way to make a game and a better way to do infrastructure.
Yeah.
And honestly, the reason that we've struggled, in prior years is frankly because there weren't a lot of companies out there building middleware tech stacks that made it easier for game devs who didn't have a blockchain engineering team to do it. Now, there are actually companies out there that can give you, turnkey-ish solutions so that you really just can focus on building the game and leave the Web3 and the smart contracts and all that kind of stuff to somebody else.
Yeah, it's definitely getting there. We see month by month, you see improvements in that area for sure.
Totally agree.
Jenny, I'll go back to Jenny. I just hijacked for a while there. So interesting, Robby, though. It's awesome to talk to you, man. So interesting.
No problem.
My next question is, Animoca Brands investment portfolio includes, first of all, you guys have a large portfolio with over 400 investments in Web3 projects, which is insane. And we've already talked about a few: Otherside, Dapper Labs, Sandbox, Cool Cats, Yuga, Ledger, MetaMask, Axie Infinity, OpenSea. It seems like you guys have funded all of Web3. And I kind of have two questions surrounding that. First one is, why are you guys investing in so many Web3 companies?
A few reasons. Let's see. The tongue-in-cheek one is we have a hard time saying no. But I guess it's really because it's a combination of seeing a tremendous amount of opportunity. And the second part is it's so early, you still don't know who are going to be the winners, so to speak. We hope everybody will be winners. And by helping to put investments in backing great teams who are building all different things across the ecosystem, that also serves to then grow the ecosystem overall. So we've invested in, wallet companies and layer ones and layer two scaling solutions and middleware tech stack people and ZK rollup people, but also people working on music and fashion and games, etc., so that hopefully, a good number of these will survive and thrive and build out this ecosystem, and ultimately they all complement each other. And the reason we're taking this approach, I think, actually comes from the fact that, we were talking earlier that, I've been with Animoca Brands for a while, but actually how I ended up at the company is because Yat, who is the co-founder, and I have been friends for a very long time. And we met when we had our first startups, internet startups, back in the 90s. So I've known Yat for 25 years now, more. And that experience during sort of the first generation of the internet, when we had businesses focused on trying to get people online to begin with onto the web, we see a lot of parallels between that experience and this experience, trying to convince businesses and individuals and corporates and game devs, et cetera, to migrate to Web3. And it's because of that similarity and the fact that we feel that this is an inevitable shift from Web 2 to Web 3, that we want to make sure that we can be a part of that, but we want to make sure also to be prudent about it and spread our bets and do what we can to try to nurture this ecosystem into becoming a reality. And so, we had the good fortune also of having an incredible sort of macroeconomic environment for a few years, from 2020 to 2022, that was really supportive of both Web3 and the game industry. And so I think we got a great tailwind during that period, so that what we can see now in this so-called bear market year is that, frankly, it's difficult, but it's if this is the bear market, then I'm really looking forward to what the bull market is.
Mm-hmm. And then how do you decide what Web3 companies to invest in?
So I think our thesis changes all the time, or evolves, I should say. I think when we started investing from 2018 to 2021, pretty much through 21, I'd say almost every investment we made was in a company that was probably the first mover in whatever they were doing. Even if it was a game dev, they were the first one to be attempting an MMO or the first one to be attempting a first-person shooter or something like that. And so we felt like so many people had first mover advantages, and we wanted to support them to just scale quickly and take advantage of that. Because in Web3, particularly when you're dealing with not just open source technology, but an ecosystem that's based on a philosophy of being open and sharing with other people, the time and speed advantage is your main advantage, because it's antithetical to Web3 to try to build walls between your products and your customers and everybody else. That's not Web3. That's not the point. And so we're not here trying to build kind of moats, as the venture capitalists call it, around our products, because it's frankly anti-Web3 to do so, and it's not in our own self-interest, much less the wider community's interest. So your real advantage is to actually have a better product and to innovate faster and to gain market share and to gain mind share and build community. Because once you build community, then the community will stick with you. You just have to nurture them. People are faithful as long as you treat them well.
I love that. That is so right too. Okay, my last question, and I'll hand it back to Michael. What are moats?
So moats. So I would define a moat as something like, a classic moat, hardware moat would be iOS. So if you have an Apple device, and you have an app in the App Store, then you have to have an Apple device to use it. And that's that hardware moat. And so if you want to go and do anything else, you have to play by Apple's rules. If you want to be a seller on the Amazon marketplace, you've only got one boss, and that's Amazon. And that's a moat, right? That's a moat. And I think that the way game developers have thought about building their games in Web 2 has also been very much about that moat mentality, meaning I think about my game, like if a player goes from my game to your game, I view that as me losing a customer and you stealing my customer, right? That's always been the perspective, because software has been built in silos, and it's been thought of as a zero-sum game that somebody only has an hour to spend. So if they're playing your game, they're not playing my game, I lost a customer. Whereas in a Web3 context, that's actually not a bad thing, because if somebody buys my NFT and then plays it in your game, then my NFT has utility in two different places. So that NFT should be worth more, and the smart contract will give me a creator royalty when that gets sold based on the fact it's worth more than just the thing I originally created. And so there's a mutual benefit. And so because of that Web3 infrastructure that allows for these creator royalties to be paid, that's really fundamental to there being an incentive for people to share. And that's why we've been very vocal about the fact that we feel creator royalties are really a fundamental part of the Web3 infrastructure of content, and they must be respected.
You think they'll come back at all, like during
creator royalties?
Yeah, because it's
100%.
kind of like okay,
because without creator royalties, you won't have any creators.
Right.
You guys are part of the is it called Open Metaverse Web 3 or something? Or what is it called?
Correct. OMA3, the Open Metaverse Alliance for Web 3. Exactly.
And the prevailing rumor out there is that you guys are building an inclusive marketplace for
rumors.
That's the rumor out there.
I'm just gonna say I can neither confirm nor deny that. That's a spicy rumor.
Michael's been trying to pry information out of this all the time.
I would never do that. I would never do that. I would never do that. But that's the rumor that I hear. I would never spread that rumor. I would never talk about it on the podcast, but go ahead.
So I was going to say the purpose of OMA3 is not anything. It's a community-based nonprofit, right? Started by 25 of the more mature Web3 businesses, metaverse companies, all of the ones we've talked about today. So everybody from Dapper to Yuga to the guys behind Axie Infinity, ourselves, Sandbox, etc. And we formed it basically because, and it's a nonprofit consortium. And the idea is that we wanted to have a venue to be able to try to figure out interoperability, because interoperability is really hard, whether it's technical challenges, legal challenges. It's not easy to get software to work with one another. And so we thought the best way to do this was the Web3 way, which is let's come together as a community, and we'll do this in a kind of as democratic a way as we can, where we all get into the room and be like, look, what's the best standard we should use? And if 25 companies in the room can agree to this, then we can open source it and tell everybody, look, if you want to connect to us, this is what we came up with. And hopefully it will snowball from there. But the last thing that we wanted was to end up with some very large Web 2 company, let's just say social network company, for example, to come and say to us, this is going to be the standard of the metaverse because we say it is. And now everybody has to use our proprietary standard, which we control and can change whenever we like.
Right. And they name themselves Meta. I know you're right. Go ahead.
Didn't they change their name back? Or
I think they may have had to. I don't know. That's like, you can't really take that word. That's like.
Yeah. But I think it's really just about, we wanted to make sure that whatever standards we end up with for this are standards that the community votes on and agrees this is the best way. This is what makes the most sense for everybody to benefit, because that's what Web3 is all about. Is look, we're all better off working together rather than sharp elbowing each other.
Yeah, I love that. You make so many good points, and I love your you just have a true understanding of Web3, which is really cool. It's I I learned a lot in the last 24 hours about you, about Animoca. It's definitely really cool, really interesting. One of the things you said that I found really interesting was, we're having this inevitable switch from Web 2 to Web 3, as you called it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to see how you describe that to people that either don't know anything about it or are skeptical. How do you describe Web 3? How do you describe blockchain? How do you make people? Yeah.
So one of the descriptions I use, so I spent 10 years in traditional media, so TV, outdoor, radio, magazines. And one of the ways that I talk to media people about Web3 is I say, this is actually digital rights management, or DRM, that works. Because for anybody who's been in the media business for any length of time, they'll remember the days when we had, music portals back in the 90s where we tried to sell MP3s and things like that. And we tried to sell videos, and, Apple has had how many closed platforms for iTunes and for movies and everything to try to sell content piece by piece to replicate physical media in a digital form. But it's never worked because we've never had digital rights management that worked. The closest thing was the physical iPod, right? And so now we've evolved to this Web 2 streaming universe where essentially the only reason we have streaming platforms is because we can't protect copyright, right? There's no reason to have streaming otherwise, because honestly, it's great for consumers. Like, how much value you get from a Spotify subscription, frankly, is overwhelming. But, for somebody of a certain age like myself, I used to spend an inordinate amount of money on CDs.
Yeah,
and now what
I was buying cassette tapes. Are you kidding? For sure.
But those, I mean, here's my confession, hundreds of dollars a month have now become $9.99. And I'm never going to pay more as long as this service exists. And that's a tragedy, because what we have now is we have this honeymoon period where all of the music that was created under royalty systems that were better for creators has been created. And so Spotify benefits from that. But what's the incentive to create new music now? Because unless you're a big name artist that can actually make profits from tours and stuff like that, you have no way to make money because there's no royalty system that's fair to you. And so I think the inevitability of Web3 comes from the fact that we found a way to basically just make really boring infrastructure so cheap that actually small businesses and individual creators can sell their wares digitally for negligible cost.
Wow. So say you're, that's incredible stuff. So say you're a musical artist and you sell say you sell 1,000 copies of your song. It's awesome. You'll make money and you get the royalties. You still have the problem with the copyright. People can just send that music anywhere, right? Or, yes. It's better for the creator. So, but how's
Correct.
that?
So I think in the case of music, for example, I don't know that there's a perfect solution yet, right? Meaning that you can still copy things just the same way I can copy your Bored Ape.
Right.
But the
people
one
can
thing
copy
we can
paintings
correct.
as well and stuff. Yep.
However, I think the thing that's important is we do at least have a way to recognize the provenance. So I can tell you if it's a fake or a legitimate one. And that's already a big milestone, because what that does is that means that there is secondary value to that copyright. So for example, if we decided that a particular song file, which is an NFT that respects royalties, etc., is a legitimate one, maybe you collect that as a fan, but because it's a legitimate one, you could sell that to your friend who runs a bar down the street who can use that to play in his bar. And he's not going to want to buy a fake to play in his bar because he's a business. He can't take that legal risk. And so the legitimacy of it matters, and the fact that he can check the provenance. And the beauty of it is that you don't need ASCAP and BMI and all of these intermediaries who do a great job, at being able to police copyright, but it's very expensive to do that. It's like getting accountants to audit your accounts. When you can do that now just with a block explorer, you actually can cut out, these 20, 30, 40% fees to vast swathes of human resources that have to go out and police copyright. If we can do it in an automated fashion, it makes it economical for the little guy. And that's the important thing.
Very cool. That's definitely a good way to explain it. That's a really good analogy and really interesting because it's always fun trying to talk to somebody about NFTs and Web3.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, it's
blockchain.
not what we're doing with NFTs is actually not particularly new. We just have a better way to do it, which is why I always like to talk about music, because actually this idea of creator royalties has been around since the 1950s. I mean, the music industry has had creator royalties for songwriters who collect royalties on music that gets performed, either live or at a karaoke or in your local pub for 80 years. And so we just have a really low-cost way to police that now that works really well.
I love that. So theoretically speaking, if there was a marketplace that was protecting royalties, that would be able to cut off the other marketplaces, right? So the only way to trade, say, a Bored Ape would be on this theoretical marketplace. Is that
so? I think
the hope?
I think the solution. We don't know what the solution is yet. We proposed, and this is on Yat's Twitter for people who are interested. We proposed a solution about a year ago when this issue first came up when Blur launched, and our solution was legal contracts. So what we proposed was that an NFT should be sold essentially with terms of service. And so you as the purchaser agree to those terms of service. And in part of that agreement is to pay a royalty. It doesn't mean that you physically or mechanically must pay that royalty. You could still bypass it. But in so doing, you violate the terms of service of that agreement. And so what that means is for the creator, they would have legal recourse to sue you for violating the terms of service. Now, we don't think that makes sense for an individual creator to do that. But the way this works is if it becomes widely adopted, it would make sense for a class action. Because if a marketplace is facilitating the bypassing of royalties and the violation of terms of service of millions and millions of dollars of goods, then that we think is grounds for a class action against a marketplace that does that. And that's leverage.
Got you. Wow.
Yeah, that's very interesting. One thing that came to my mind too when we were talking about music and creator royalties was I remember learning that I think 1 million downloads on Spotify for your song gets you $1,000, which is just so little. And it's just so crazy how little musicians make on these streaming platforms. And you're like, whoa, that's kind of shocking. And yeah, it just feels like unless you're super massive, you're not really making much. You really have to struggle.
And the same thing applies to something like YouTube, for example, because YouTube has been a great platform for people who create video content to be able to make money. But you can only turn on ad monetization after the first, I don't know what it is, 100,000 or 10,000 views of your video. And so you need to get to a certain scale for YouTube to feel like it's worth their while to start cutting you in on ad revenue. So it really only applies to creators who are, upper middle class creators, if you want to call it that, who have a certain following, because frankly, you guys are different, you're professionals, but to get 100,000 views is not easy for an individual creator. And so I think what our hope is that this Web3 infrastructure will really enable smaller creators to monetize smaller fan bases. I mean, if you have 5 or 5,000 fans, why shouldn't you be able to build a small business out of that? Because if you were a small shop with 5,000 customers, you should be able to build a business out of that.
Yeah, you're right. Now, if you can get 5,000 people to give you $100 a year for all your stuff, you're doing pretty well.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, right?
Exactly. And I think that's also what we saw originally in the early days of mobile gaming, because when mobile was young and we didn't have to compete so much to acquire users, the cost of user acquisition was relatively low. Making money on mobile was relatively easy for years, and it enabled lots of small game developers and app developers to get into the business and make a living, because if you had a 2 or 3 person team, you could make, $500,000 a year in the app store, and that's real money for a small team.
Absolutely is. I had to laugh to myself when I said the person selling 1,000 of them at $100 each or whatever it was is making good money, 5,000, 100. And me and Jenny were like, yeah, it's good money. And Robbie's probably like, I don't think that's very good money.
Hey, it's great. As we all know, in the down market, the biggest the biggest achievement, frankly, is to be able to meet your payroll for many years.
That's the truth.
That's $500,000. That's solid.
I know. No, it's great. Yeah, it's great. But to Robbie, probably laughed at it. But that's all. You're right. There's a lot of these companies are laying people off. I mean, even some of the ones you invest in. I mean, it's the nature of the beast. But a lot of companies.
Of course. Well, and I mean, and the important thing, as we've seen in this market, is you need to be the right size for the business that you are. And and expanding and contracting, there's no shame in that. That's just part of the business cycle. But I think success, in my mind, is defined by longevity. If you can be there for the long term, that's amazing.
Facts. So I'll switch up a little bit. I want to get into regulations a little bit with you. I want to see how you navigate regulations, especially with respect to like the United States versus Asia versus Europe. And I'd also like your perspective on who's like, I'm sure it's not the United States, but whose strategy you think is most forward thinking and proper. What do you think the proper strategy should be for governments?
So I think the proper strategy needs to be one that is both, I said it sounds condescending to say educated, but well-informed, I think is probably the best way to put it. A very well-informed strategy, meaning that the government that is implementing that strategy thoroughly understands and has spoken to participants across the spectrum and really gets the industry. And I think that education process often takes time, which is why regulation tends to lag greatly. But once they are well informed, then I think, very solid guidelines need to be in place, because solid guidelines are what give consumers and businesses confidence, and they will invest more in those markets. It's just the nature of the beast. And as much as people can, look at financial regulation, people moan and groan about financial regulation in the US, but it happens to have the world's largest capital market. And a lot of that is due to the fact that there is a lot of financial regulation and people feel confidence in the markets, and that's important. I think looking at some of the examples that you've been citing, I mean, obviously, I have to give a shout out to Hong Kong, which is our hometown, because Hong Kong has, I think, after having been quite quiet on Web3 during the whole COVID period, has really emerged from COVID and put its foot out down and said, look, we are going to be a leader in Web3 and we're going to put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to start to implement regulation. We're going to start to make investment, and we're going to make ourselves a home for Web3 businesses, because we think this is part of the future of Hong Kong's role as a technology center and a financial center. And so they've done that. And in fact, as we were alluding to earlier, it's FinTech Week in Hong Kong. And so there's a lot of activity. And in fact, Hong Kong FinTech Week is very Web3 feeling if you're there or seeing some of the coverage of what's going on there. And I suppose it's no coincidence that we're co-hosting Ape Fest the same week. So we've brought a lot of apes to town for FinTech Week too. So hopefully we can encourage everybody in the FinTech world also to be starting to think more about Web3. I think other places that you've mentioned, obviously the Middle East, Dubai has really been a leader in this space from a regulatory standpoint for a while. And I think also they were able to do that. They were able to make get a lot of head start during the COVID period, because they were, as an economy, quite open relative to other markets that had lockdowns and things like that. And I think Europe now is moving forward. And I say that because we've seen MiCA in the EU, and actually the UK just came out with guidance this week, which I think is very sensible, where they've, if my read of it is correct, and this is just my own take on it, understanding of it, but it seems to be segregating a difference between financial products that are tokenized and entertainment or content products that are tokenized. And I think this is a really, really important distinction, because one of the challenges we've seen with some of the regulatory environments is where regulators just say, well, anything that's tokenized, we're going to treat the same way. And frankly, a $2 item in a game, like some kind of tokenized NFT sword, is very different from tokenizing the title deed to your property, or some kind of convertible bond that's tokenized. These are all very different things, and just because they're tokenized doesn't make them the same thing. I think lastly, to speak on the US, I'm not really sure what's going on in the US right now, just because I think the only thing I can say about it is it feels volatile in terms of the regulatory environment, and that volatility is bad for the market. And so we see a lot of companies, I think, moving their who are interested in Web3 and actively investing in Web3, moving their investment activity overseas and putting it on pause in the US just because they don't know what's going on, frankly. And that's not great for America in the Web3 business.
That's a shame. That's really a shame. I mean, I see it both sides. We have these people in our Senate. Our 100 senators are the most powerful people, and they're all just not in that wheelhouse. They're not up on that or care about it. It's a shame. And we don't have anybody that can make decisions for us or help us move forward in that respect. It's really a shame.
Yes. Well, and also, I mean, let's not get into US politics, but let's just say it's been very much engaged in its own melodrama for many years now.
Totally. It's horrible. It's horrible. It's embarrassing. It's horrible. Sorry. But no, like we're handcuffing our own people if we don't, if we let everyone else around the world, speaking from an American point of view, I'm down here in South Florida. If we let everyone else get a head start, on the inevitable Web3, like you said. Yeah.
I think I don't see this stifling innovation in America in Web3, but I think what will happen is that Americans will still entrepreneurs are still going to do what they do. They're just going to do it through offshore vehicles. And so for the US taxpayer, they don't get the benefit of the income and revenue that these businesses are going to make because they're going to be offshoring their structures. But I do think that, this doesn't slow down the amount of creative teams in Web3 that are based in the US.
No doubt. That's cool. I have one more question before we go into gas wars. Jenny, you have any more? I know I don't want to hold Robby up too long. We got
I'm pretty good.
10 minutes left. Okay, cool. Well, I saw you you spoke a bunch about AI and how Animoca has been using and integrating AI for a long time. I just wanted to kind of see what you guys do with AI. Do you use do you create like gaming assets? I know you use it for the NPCs, quote unquote. And then and how long before I'm able to have text to video game, text to AAA game? How long is that?
Okay, so you said AAA, so therefore I don't know. But if you just want text to game,
sure,
you can do that today. So just go to rosebud.ai. We have a portfolio company. Yeah, we have a portfolio company called Rosebud.
Let's go.
Rosebud AI, which is based in California, and they are just they've been in AI for a while. They, I think, caught people's attention with. Do you remember the very early deepfake videos where you could create your own video and it would look like a celebrity saying something?
I remember like the Tom Cruise ones that were coming out early on. For sure.
Exactly. And so they got into it back then. And so they have actually a product in beta right now, which is a game maker that allows you to make simple games. So kind of Flappy Bird style games, etc., with just simply a text prompt. And we have another company that's in New York called Dapper Labs. And they have a product called Skybox, which basically tries to it's kind of revolutionizing how you visualize games. So what they do is you can use a text prompt to create a 3D rendered environment. So basically, imagine a single point perspective where you can look around 360 degrees up and down around, and everything is rendered in 3D, because most text prompts for generative AI only result in a 2D image. So they can do it in 3D. And because you can do it so quickly, for a video game developer or designer, you can basically have like a brainstorming meeting and be like, yeah, let's do orcs in space. And what'll that look like? I don't know. Let's put in a text prompt and see. Whereas you used to have to storyboard and then have a meeting 3 weeks later once you'd drawn out all these storyboards to say, is your idea good or is it crap? And now you can do that instantly, essentially. And the cool thing I think about AI is how fast the space moves, because even in a Web3 timeline, it feels fast. So they came out with this probably 4 months ago, and now they've just come out with the ability to basically take those spaces, 3D spaces, 360-degree spaces and knit them together. And so when you do that, you essentially create a 3D space for which you can then go into, meaning it has depth. So you don't just have to stand in one point. You can actually move around because it will virtually sew them together. And so, if you see the pace of that progress, you can only imagine that, getting to the point of making immersive game environments, at least beautiful things you can walk around in, for example. I mean, we're months away, not even years away.
Wow, man. It's so fun.
Jen and I have been talking. Is amazing.
Yeah. We kind of came across it like when the whole world did, when GPT 3.5 released, that was kind of the boom. And since then, I mean, that's all I do. Like I'm GPT plus. They came out with the Dolly 3 integration just a few weeks ago. That's blown my mind. I love that. But like this, I just signed up for the waiting list. I'm going to try and skirt my way past it somehow for Rosebud. That's an awesome recommendation there. That's cool.
Yeah.
That was not planned.
And definitely go to Blockade Labs and try out their Skybox AI.
Yeah, I'm going to try that too.
You'll have fun.
Both of that sounds awesome. That's really cool. I love that. AI is like the best thing about it is the speed of how it changes, because the people that just looked at it when it first got popular, like, oh, it's cool and all, they don't realize how much has changed since then.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's amazing because it really feels like there's a generational change every quarter, frankly.
Do you have a favorite AI tool for yourself?
No, honestly, I'm trying to figure out how best to use them within my own sort of work environment. Whether it's like, drafting emails or stuff, but it's hard. I'm an old guy. Old habits are hard to change.
What's good? What's really good is brainstorming, because you can just like, give me 20 more, give me 20 more, give me 20 more. And you might take 3 or 4 of them. Like, I really like it for that. I use it for every single thing I do. I try and figure out a way. The real key is how creative you are with the prompting, because it will give you amazing results if you give it good input. So that's what I try to work on for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Nice. All right, where are you at, Jenny? Got one more Gas Wars?
Yeah, we can head into Gas Wars.
Because I have like 10 more questions. I literally could go another hour with you, Robby. This is you're a brilliant dude. Like everything we ask, you have a real thoughtful answer. It's really cool. But I think it's probably time for Gas Wars, so we don't keep you too long, man, for sure.
Oh no. I'm reluctant to ask, what are Gas Wars? Because all I can think of was the ApeCoin launch.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're gonna have to mint something.
Right.
And
all right, break out your first. You give us your seed phrase, and then we'll get into it.
Okay, so Gas Wars is our rapid fire question segment where we each ask 5 questions not having to do with the NFT space, and we just kind of give us your answer. And if you want to kind of share a story, then you can, or if you just want to keep it
no problem.
short,
okay,
whatever you want to do.
Go for it.
All right, I'll start. What is your favorite movie?
What is my favorite movie? Oh my God, that's hard. I have to say, it used to be Cinema Paradiso, but I think as the art of movie making has evolved, I find that now I'm a little bit on the fence between movies and limited series, because frankly, when you have 5 episodes or 6 episodes, you have the ability to get much more depth in a story. So I feel like the medium is blurring a little bit, because I've seen some great, as Netflix calls them, limited series.
Okay, well, what's your favorite limited series?
So what did we watch recently? We watched something. Oh, I guess it's not very limited. I was going to say the last thing we watched was Ozark, but I think my wife and I managed to do that in like a week or something like that. We just binged completely. But I think it's about getting all of that character depth. I mean, if you look at something like if you go with the uncut Lord of the Rings trilogy, like the original trilogy, and you actually watch each 3-hour segment, that's like whatever, 9 or 12 hours of content, and it's amazing. It's so rich and it's so deep, and I don't think you need to particularly be a fantasy fan or a genre fan, because there's so much in it from the storytelling angle that it's really just about a great story of friendship. So I'd say something like that would really be an example.
Very nice. What is the most iconic video game ever made?
Can I give 3?
Of course.
Well, because it's hard to decide. For me, it's going to be Space Invaders because I feel like that was really my first video game, although I played Pong, but Pong was, Space Invaders was a sea change compared to Pong. And I'd say Pac-Man because that also is pretty dear to me. But in terms of hours spent, it's got to be Tetris.
What, dude? Tetris is I can't believe you just said
favorite.
that. I am a Tetris master. I've been playing since 1995. We might have to have...
Since I was born, that's crazy.
And frankly, just as a side note, if you haven't seen the Tetris film, you have to see the film. I've
awesome. I've heard that. Someone else told me that.
Yes.
Where they do the competitions.
No, the Tetris film that's about the origins of Tetris.
Oh, I need
Taron
to see
Egerton.
that.
It's on Apple. You need to see it. It's really.
I need to see it.
It's a great film.
Yeah.
Just even if you don't play Tetris, it's a great film.
Yeah. Okay. I definitely need to see it. Our friend Mark built a Tetris that skinned like O'Peppin, and he did a leaderboard, and I dominate. Like no one else knows how to play Tetris like I do. But I'm sure there's professionals out there that would kill me. Good answer, Jenny. Your question.
All right. Best restaurant you've been to?
Oh, very hard to say, but I think the easiest answer to generalize is you could say it's probably in Tokyo. But yeah, I would say Japan wins for this. So I've had a few sushi meals in Japan that were just amazing. And I think
Tokyo over Kyoto.
Both very good, although to be honest, I've spent a lot more time in Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
I've only been to Kyoto a couple times, but it's about the investment of the people in making sure that the customer has this amazing experience, and it's about the maniacal attention to detail,
the quality, right? The details,
everything.
Yes, totally, I couldn't agree more.
Over the top.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it extends not just to sushi, obviously, because frankly, if you go and have French food in Tokyo, it's, I'm going to get killed by my French friends for saying this, but it's probably going to be better than the French food you eat in France.
Nice. All right, Michael.
All right, where am I at? My next question was kind of similar to that, so I'm going to save it. What is a hobby you enjoy in your free time?
This is going to sound weird, but I like to run.
I've always been. Do you run marathons?
I used to. I don't have time for the training anymore because it requires a lot of training, and and I used to be able to do it with less training, but I'm a little too old for that now. But yeah, I do. I'll do half marathons and 10Ks, and
wow.
I flirted with. I did a couple of triathlons during the pandemic just to try something new. But that's I'm a terrible
impressive.
Swimmer.
Oh, yeah, that's always part of it.
That part's really hard for me.
Okay. Do you or did you ever play any musical instruments?
Oh, I tried to learn lots, and I was rubbish at all of them. But I love music.
Nice.
That's funny. What's your favorite museum?
Favorite museum?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
museum.
That's actually easy. The Dali Museum in Figueras, just north of Barcelona.
That's awesome. I've been to Barcelona and I wanted to go up there. It was in the summertime and they told us the traffic was too bad and we couldn't do it. But Dali is one of my favorites. There's a Dali Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, believe it or not. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No,
there's
I didn't know.
Really nice one. One of his largest collectors happened just built that museum. And it's got giant pieces. It's amazing. St. Petersburg, Florida.
I think the reason for this is because, I love Dali's work. He's not necessarily my favorite artist, but the thing about the museum that's magical is that he designed the museum.
Right. It's his house, right?
Yeah. And so what happens is that the way you experience it is a piece in and of itself because the building is as crazy as his work. And that's the reason it's cool. I think the one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give a shout out to my friends at Paris Blockchain Week because speaking of museums, this past year, they had their speakers VIP dinner at the beginning of the event, and they arranged for us to eat in the Louvre. And what we got basically was 2 hours by ourselves, just a bunch of Web3 people in the Louvre with nobody else. And I have to say that's got to be the greatest perk available, because just to have some time alone with some of the world's greatest art is an amazing experience.
That is amazing.
Crazy.
Did you tell them that the French food in Japan was better than what they served?
Okay. Have you ever broken a bone?
I've broken many fingers. When
Really?
when I was a teenager, something about growing fast and playing crappy basketball, I kept breaking my fingers.
That's interesting.
I was a roll my ankle guy, but that's not fun breaking your fingers. Yeah. So I have a bunch of friends in Hong Kong right now. I need an epic recommendation for them. I don't know if it's a park or a restaurant or a market, but I know you spent time in Hong Kong and
yes. Oh my God. So there are so many things I can recommend.
Wow.
I would say you have to have roast meat, because that's what Hong Kong is most famous for. So like char siu, roast pork, for people who eat pork. And there are lots of good restaurants for that. You can Google them. One of my favorites has always been Yung Ki, which is a classic restaurant right in Central there. And I would say the other thing is, for people who have spare time, one of the things that most people don't know about Hong Kong when they visit is that actually it's 1/3 parkland. So despite all the tall buildings, there's lots of country parks. And so if you want to go out for a trail walk or a run, there are actually many, many places to do that. And just ask your hotel, because there's going to be a place that's actually not too far from you to go and do that. And it's quite amazing to do it because it's a very mountainous terrain overlooking the harbor. So like there's an amazing view wherever you go.
the pictures have looked amazing that I've seen coming back. They've looked really beautiful. Yeah.
Yes. And also, given that it's November, it's not too hot, because Hong Kong's quite hot for much of the year. So it's a good time to get outdoors.
Awesome. Good, Rex. Thank you, sir.
All right. My last question is, have you ever won a contest?
Have I ever won a contest? So I guess the short answer is, if I had, it would have been significant enough for me to remember it, I guess. So I think the answer is probably going to be no then.
Okay.
Nice. And my last question, I have actually retired this one for a while, but I think bringing it back with you is good because I'd like to hear your answer. My question is apes or punks?
They're so different.
They are.
So they're different. Now, I think for me personally, and this is just for me, I would probably say punk. And I would say punk only because for me personally, I think that the ape social events may be wasted on me because I'm a middle-aged guy, right? And so I don't have the ability to go and hang out until all hours with people anymore. And so from a lifestyle standpoint, I think the benefits of community might be lost on me. So for that, I'd be a buy and hold collector, in which case punks are more appropriate.
Good answer. That's what everybody has answered. And that's why I retired the question. It was closer when like apes are worth a lot more money when I started asking it, but good answer, man. That was good stuff. Good gas wars.
Yeah. Thank you, Robby, for coming on the show. That was fun. You really had a lot of good stories too with our gas wars questions. So, but yeah, thanks for coming on and talking about Animoca Brands and entertaining Michael with him trying to pry information.
I'm just not going to take him on in Tetris because now I know.
Oh, we need to.
Need a Tetris tournament.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it was great speaking with you, and really appreciate the chance to come on the show and chat with you.
Thanks, Robby.
Yes. All right. And with that said, thank you all for tuning into this episode of the NFT Catcher podcast, and we will catch you in the next one. Peace.
Thank you for tuning in to the NFT Catcher podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned something new about the exciting world of NFTs. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you really love what you're hearing, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite platform. If you want to stay up to date with the latest news and insights from the NFT space, be sure to follow us on all the socials at NFT Catcher Pod. You can follow Jennifer at Jennifer_pseudo and Michael at NFTicket. I'm your producer, Andy, and I'm at AJC254. Our theme song's by It's Just Los. We always appreciate your feedback and support, which helps us reach more people and bring you informative and engaging content about NFTs. We look forward to bringing you more great NFT content in future episodes. Thanks for listening. Peace.